If you're a real estate enthusiast or travel a lot, you probably have some knowledge about Airbnb. For the sake of rental arbitrage, which is making money on Airbnb without asking property, the question we all may ask is, how do you convince a landlord to allow Airbnb? Not to worry though, because in this video, I'll tell you exactly how to do just that. But if you're new to the channel, we post videos every week, so make sure to subscribe and stay notified every time we drop a new video. Over the years, Airbnb has become a worldwide trend, and anyone with a spare bedroom can make some extra cash by renting out their space on Airbnb. Now, to be clear, a lot of non-property owners host on Airbnb, but they usually have to seek permission from the property owner. Whatever you do, be honest with your landlord and don't let them find out by themselves. As experts say, an angry landlord is a surest way to kill a good Airbnb deal. Stay until the end of this video because I'll break down each of these 10 steps in detail, so you want to make sure you're hearing exactly what to do. Number 1. Understand the landlord's perspective. Before going on about asking your landlord for hosting permission, you must understand why they would likely object to that request. Landlords know there are some high risks when it comes to hosting on Airbnb. For example, what if a tenant asks to let strangers into your property? That just turned from a low-risk rental to a high-risk with very modest income. Letting strangers into your home would be a very high risk because even though Airbnb verifies guests as much as possible, there's still a chance you'd encounter terrible guests. These guests could turn out to be thieves or really violent people that disturb the neighborhood. Heck, they could just be regular careless people that cause property damage. Whichever of these scenarios happens, you can be sure you won't like that outcome. Number 2, short-term rentals are illegal in some cities. This means that you stand the risk of being fined or caught or even worse. But wait, there's more. In case of property damage, the hometown insurance policy will deny all claims if they find out the space was being rented like a business. Obviously, Airbnb is a business. They might completely cancel the landlord's insurance, making the entire building illegal. When you think like a landlord and place these risks against the little rewards you might get, it would simply not make sense to allow Airbnb. This is where you'll need to follow this next pitch to make the landlord feel at ease. Number 3, pitch the idea to your landlord. Make a convincing game plan. If you're fully aware of the risks involved from your landlord's perspective, you simply have to find a means of eliminating most of these risks and, if possible, upping the reward a little bit. Upping the reward doesn't necessarily mean a rent increase, but that's all it takes sometimes. A constructive conversation is key to convincing your landlord. But first, figure out your position as a tenant. Some questions you might ask yourself are, is your landlord a person open to new ideas? What is your level of relationship with the landlord? How long have you been a tenant in that property? Does your landlord know anything about Airbnb and how it works? Does he own any other rental properties? Have these questions in mind and weigh the pros and cons before asking your landlord about Airbnb hosting. Number 4, engage the landlord in friendly discussions. You will need to get on your landlord's good side before pitching an idea of any sort. Approach him like a friend and not a business owner. Start up a healthy conversation with them, like using areas of interest. It could be sports. Ask him about the game last week. Obviously, it could be real estate markets as they are already a landlord. Whatever you do, make sure to get on their good side and put them in as good a mood as possible. Next up at number 5, remember to meet them in person. At times, the landlord doesn't live in the property and therefore, it's not easy to meet them in person. But try as much as possible to meet him or her in person, not through phone calls or texts. The reason is that these physical meetings convey a lot more verbal signals than texts or phone calls. This might even lead you to uncover an objection you hadn't anticipated. Find out his standpoint on Airbnb hosting. Some landlords are surprisingly open to their tenants hosting on Airbnb. You should find out your landlord's opinion. You must not ask them directly. After striking up an engaging conversation as explained before, bring it up in an indirect manner. Hi, Mr. Landlord. I was introduced to Airbnb on my recent trip. I was just wondering whether you have an opinion about Airbnb. By asking this, you're not directly giving away your intentions to host. You're simply asking to know his opinion. If he doesn't know about Airbnb, give him a good briefing about it. Number 6, prepare for the meeting with information in hand. Be totally transparent with presenting your plans to them. Make them understand that you're well aware of the risks that come with it. Explain the Airbnb business model and how you plan to mitigate the potential risks that might arise. Give them the assurance that you're ready to ensure the safety of the property. Number 7. Dealing with common objections from your landlord. Believe me when I say that a good number of landlords would still be skeptical at this point. Even when the conversation is going great, he's still likely to voice out concerns about hosting Airbnb on that property. Some common objections include insurance for potential damaged property. We've already talked about why landlords wouldn't want to risk property damage with Airbnb hosting, and rightfully so. You should tell them that Airbnb is a platform built on trust and safety resources, like the $1 million host guarantee and the $1 million host protection policy. If they're still not convinced, suggest additional rental insurance and offer a contract clause, which would make you responsible for any property damages. There's also the option of negotiating a larger security deposit. Risk of property damage leads to increased depreciation. A landlord ideally wants to keep his property value intact or appreciating, so it's logical he'd be concerned about different strangers in the home, potentially leading to property damage and increased depreciation. You should tell him that most of the Airbnb guests are either on business trips or vacations. This means that they're not likely to spend a lot of time in the house as to damaged properties. Not to mention, you constantly clean and fix minor damages after every hosting. If not, you might be getting a lot of bad reviews from clients. Basically, you're taking charge of maintaining the property to avoid damages. And then at number 8, we have bad guests. The last thing a landlord would want is strangers causing chaos in his apartment, either by property damage or harassing the neighbors. In this case, you must give your landlord the assurance that 99% of Airbnb guests are reasonable and trustworthy. You can also implement guest screening and pick only suitable guest profiles that fit your standards. These guests would have to strictly agree to following all of the house rules before they book. Alternatively, you can offer to host only specific groups like business travelers. Also, if you're planning to rent a room, you can tell your landlord that you'd be there with them to avoid complications of any sort. Number 9. Legalities. Another major concern for landlords is how legal Airbnb hosting might be in that city. Before pitching the idea to host, you must have done your research on whether Airbnb is legal in your city. While that should naturally answer the question, the landlord might not be comfortable hearing it from you. As a last resort, get a legal counsel to confirm that it's legal. Contracts, insurance, and tenants' rights are usually handled by the landlord's lawyer. Get him on board and make him support and pitch your idea to the landlord. He will generally pitch it as a legal option that could also be an avenue of making extra cash. If the lawyer supports your idea, it'll be much more difficult for the landlord to turn you down. Number 10. What do they stand to gain? Perhaps even more than a protective property owner, the landlord is a business owner looking for a new avenue to make money. You can offer to share profits and give him a percentage of each booking, which would yield them a higher rent. After all these steps, there's still a chance that your landlord objects to Airbnb. In that case, you should start looking for alternatives, like rented properties where the landlord doesn't kick against Airbnb. No matter what, we don't recommend hosting on Airbnb without the landlord's knowledge or approval. If you want me to explain exactly what questions and concerns you'll need to ask, I break it down for you in this next video in detail, so you can guarantee they will say yes. Click the video on your screen now, and I'll see you in the next one.